The neon lights of Nexus Prime painted the night sky in vibrant blues and purples, casting long shadows across the city's jagged skyline. Hovercars zipped between towering structures that seemed to defy gravity, their engines humming against the backdrop of pulsing electronic music spilling from countless establishments below. In this sprawling metropolis, where technology and biology merged in ways still not fully understood, Jack Evans stood on a rooftop, watching the world through eyes that had seen too much. Jack wasn't what most would call a good man, a smuggler by trade and a charmer by necessity. He had built a reputation among Nexus Prime's shadier elements as someone who could get things done without asking questions. His weathered leather jacket bore the scars of countless close calls, and the blaster holstered at his hip had gotten him out of even more. Tonight, though, Jack felt uneasy. The package secured in his inner pocket weighed practically nothing, but its significance bore down on him like a gravitational anomaly. Just another job, he muttered to himself, watching his breath form small clouds in the chilly night air. Deliver the package, collect the credits, disappear. The Cosmic Drift Bar was his destination, a notorious watering hole for mercenaries, smugglers, and anyone else who preferred to conduct business away from prying eyes. As Jack descended from the rooftop via the external lift, he adjusted his jacket to conceal both his weapon and the package. The small black box, no larger than his palm, contained something called a Nexus cipher. Jack didn't know what it was, exactly, but he knew enough to understand that multiple factions would kill to possess it. The bar's entrance was flanked by bouncers of different species, their eyes scanning each patron with cybernetic enhancements that could detect weapons and contraband. Jack had paid handsomely for the scrambler embedded in his belt buckle, technology that created just enough digital noise to confuse most scanners. He nodded casually to the Krell bouncer, a reptilian humanoid whose scaled skin gleamed under the purple lighting. "Busy night?" Jack asked, feigning disinterest. The Krell grunted an affirmative, waving him through with three-fingered hands that could crush a human skull without effort. The familiar smell of synthetic alcohol and exotic spices hit Jack's nostrils as he stepped inside. The Cosmic Drift lived up to its name, the interior designed to mimic the feeling of floating through space, with holographic nebulae swirling across the ceiling and gravity manipulators creating the slightest sensation of weightlessness near the bar. Jack made his way toward the counter, eyes scanning the crowd for his contact. The clientele was diverse even by Nexus Prime standards. Humans mingled with various alien species, augmented individuals whose bodies were more machine than flesh, and even a few beings whose origins defied classification. At the bar stood Thorn, a human bartender whose augmented arms moved with inhuman speed, mixing drinks with mathematical precision. "The usual, Jack?" Thorn asked, already reaching for a bottle of Arcturian whiskey. "Not tonight," Jack replied, leaning against the counter. "I'm working." Thorn raised an eyebrow. "Your buyer's not here yet. Came in asking earlier, then left. Said something about security concerns." The bartender leaned closer. "There's been Vanguard movement in the sector. Might want to keep that package of yours close." Jack tensed. The Vanguard was the enforcement arm of the hegemony, the dominant political power in this sector of space. If they were sniffing around, it meant the cipher was even more valuable than he'd been told. "Thanks for the tip," Jack said, sliding a credit chip across the counter. "I'll take that drink after all." As Thorn prepared the whiskey, Jack's attention was drawn to a commotion in the corner of the bar. A group of Krell mercenaries, different from the bouncer outside, had surrounded someone at a booth. Their postures were aggressive, scaled hands resting on holstered weapons. Jack couldn't see who they were harassing, but he heard a female voice, defiant despite being outnumbered. "I've told you 3 times. I'm not interested in your offer." The voice had an unusual timbre, not quite human, but not entirely alien either. Jack sipped his whiskey, debating whether to intervene, It wasn't his business, and drawing attention to himself with the cipher in his pocket was the last thing he needed. One of the Krell grabbed something from the table, a small device that Jack couldn't identify from this distance. The female voice grew more urgent. "Return that immediately!" "Or what? Blue skin," the lead Krell hissed, towering over his target. "You're alone here. No one's going to help you." Jack cursed under his breath. He had a policy against playing hero. It rarely paid well and often ended badly. But something about the situation tugged at him. Perhaps it was the whiskey, or perhaps it was the memory of being cornered himself more times than he could count. Before he could reconsider, Jack found himself approaching the booth, drink in hand. "Evening, gentlemen," he said casually. "Seems like the lady isn't interested in your company." The Krell turned toward him, yellow eyes narrowing. The leader was at least a head taller than Jack, with muscle mass that suggested both natural strength and chemical enhancement. "Walk away, human," the Krell warned. "This doesn't concern you." Jack finally got a clear view of who they were harassing. A woman with skin the color of a deep ocean, a vibrant blue that seemed to shimmer slightly under the bar's lighting. Her hair, stark white against her blue skin, was tied back in intricate braids that suggested a cultural heritage Jack didn't recognize. Her eyes, entirely black except for pinpoints of silver light where pupils should be, regarded him with surprise and suspicion. "Actually," Jack said, maintaining his casual demeanor, "I believe that device belongs to my associate here." He nodded toward the blue-skinned woman. "And we're late for an important meeting." The lead Krell's hand moved to his blaster. "Your associate? You expect us to believe?" In one fluid motion, Jack accidentally spilled his drink across the Krell's chest. The mercenary roared in anger, momentarily distracted by the burning sensation of Arcturian whiskey on his scales. Jack used the moment to snatch the device from the Krell's hand and slide it across the table to the woman. "Time to go," he said, grabbing her arm. The woman moved with unexpected grace, vaulting over the table and retrieving her device in one smooth motion. Jack barely had time to register her speed before she was pulling him toward the rear exit, the Krell mercenaries shouting behind them. They burst through the back door into an alley illuminated only by distant neon signs. The woman released Jack's arm and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't need your help," she said, her voice cooler now. "You're welcome," Jack replied sarcastically. "Those Krell wouldn't have let you leave with that." He gestured toward the device now secured in her hand. "Whatever it is, why did you intervene?" she asked, ignoring his comment about the device. "What do you want?" Jack shrugged. "Call it a momentary lapse of judgment. I don't like bullies, especially reptilian ones." He extended his hand. "Jack Evans." She hesitated before taking it. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, but not unpleasantly so. "Narella." The sound of angry voices from inside the bar grew louder. Jack glanced toward the door. "Those Krell won't be happy. I suggest we continue this conversation elsewhere." Narella nodded, her eyes scanning the alley. "Follow me. I know a place." They moved quickly through Nexus Prime's labyrinthine back streets. The city's lower levels, a maze of narrow passages and forgotten infrastructure. Narella navigated with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the urban terrain. Jack followed, keeping pace despite his growing curiosity about the woman he'd just helped. "So," he ventured as they climbed an external staircase attached to an abandoned warehouse. "What did those Krell want with you?" "Information," Narella replied tersely. "About?" "Things that don't concern you." They reached the warehouse roof, and Narella moved to the edge, surveying the cityscape below. Jack hung back, sensing her caution. Something about her posture and awareness of their surroundings suggested military training. "You're not from Nexus Prime," he observed. "Neither are you," she countered. Jack chuckled. "Born on Earth, Raised on 3 different colony worlds after my parents couldn't settle on which hellhole they preferred. He joined her at the edge of the roof, maintaining a respectful distance. Your turn. Narella remained silent, her attention seemingly focused on a hovership approaching from the east. Jack followed her gaze and tensed. The vehicle bore the unmistakable markings of the Vanguard. Friends of yours? He asked. Hardly. Narella's hand moved to her hip, where Jack now noticed a sleek blaster holstered against her thigh. They're after something valuable, something that shouldn't fall into their hands. Jack felt the weight of the cipher in his pocket. Funny coincidence. I'm in a similar situation. Their eyes met, and a moment of understanding passed between them. Before either could speak, the warehouse door below burst open. The Krell mercenaries from the bar spilled out, weapons drawn. Up there! One shouted, pointing to the roof. Narella drew her blaster with lightning speed, and Jack reached for his own weapon. The first shots from below scorched the edge of the roof near their feet. This way! Narella called, sprinting toward the opposite side of the warehouse. Jack followed, ducking as energy bolts sizzled past his head. They reached a point where the warehouse roof nearly touched an adjacent building, leaving a gap of about 2 meters. Without hesitation, Narella leaped across, landing gracefully on the other side. Jack, with less grace but equal determination, followed, nearly losing his footing on the landing. Narella pulled him up. Keep moving! They raced across several rooftops, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. The Vanguard hovership had changed course, moving in their general direction, but not yet pinpointing their location. Jack's breath came in sharp bursts, the adrenaline clearing his head. We need to get off these roofs, he gasped. Too exposed. Narella nodded toward a maintenance hatch on the current building. There. They descended into the building, an automated factory producing synthetic textiles. The enormous production floor was dimly lit and largely devoid of workers, with robotic arms moving in precise patterns across assembly lines. They navigated through the machinery, using the noise and shadows for cover. The Krell will have called in our description, Jack said as they paused behind a large fabrication unit. And the Vanguard isn't far behind. Narella studied him with those unsettling black eyes. Why were you in that bar tonight? Jack Evans? Business, he replied vaguely. Why were you? I was waiting for someone. A courier with a package of extreme importance. Jack's pulse quickened. What kind of package? A Nexus cipher. The directness of her answer surprised him. Either she trusted him for some reason, or she was setting him up. Jack decided to gamble. Black box, about this big? He held up his thumb and forefinger, indicating the size. Weighs almost nothing, but everyone's willing to kill for it? Narella's expression shifted subtly. You're the courier. I was supposed to meet my buyer at the Cosmic Drift. Thorne said they'd been there asking questions, then left. I left because I detected Vanguard presence in the sector, Narella explained. I couldn't risk them tracking me to the exchange. Jack reached into his inner pocket and extracted the small black box. This is what you're looking for, I presume. Narella's eyes fixed on the cipher, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw the silver pinpoints of her pupils expand slightly. She reached for it, but Jack pulled it back. Not so fast. I was promised payment. Significant payment. You'll get your credits, Narella assured him. But we need to reach safety first. A loud crash from the far end of the factory floor interrupted their negotiation. The Krell mercenaries had found their way inside. Time to move, Jack said, pocketing the cipher again. They sprinted toward the factory's loading bay, where automated cargo vehicles were being loaded with finished textiles. Narella pointed to one of the vehicles, a mid-sized transport with an open cabin. Can you fly that? Jack grinned. I can fly anything. They climbed aboard, and Jack quickly assessed the controls. Standard configuration, nothing he hadn't handled before. He activated the engine, which hummed to life with reassuring efficiency. The loading bay doors were already open for outgoing shipments, offering a clear path to escape. "Hold on," Jack warned as he pushed the throttle forward. The transport lurched, and then accelerated out of the loading bay into the night air. Behind them, energy weapons fired, most shots going wild, but one grazing the vehicle's rear panel. Jack veered sharply into the flow of aerial traffic, weaving between other vehicles with reckless precision. "We need somewhere to hide," he called over the wind rushing past them. "Suggestions?" Norella pointed toward the spaceport on the city's outskirts. "Docking Bay 17. There's a ship waiting, the Stellar Rogue." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Your ship?" "Let's say I have an arrangement with its captain." They abandoned the transport at the edge of the spaceport, continuing on foot through service corridors that bypassed the main security checkpoints. Norella moved with the confident stealth of someone used to operating outside official channels, and Jack followed her lead, impressed despite himself. Docking Bay 17 contained a sleek, mid-sized vessel that Jack recognized as a modified Horizon-class transport, civilian designation, but the subtle weapons ports and enhanced thrusters suggested it had been customized for more demanding situations. Norella approached the ship's entry ramp and placed her hand on a biometric scanner. "Norella +1, she stated clearly. "Emergency departure protocol." The scanner glowed blue, matching her skin tone for a moment, before the ramp extended fully with a hydraulic hiss. They boarded quickly, and the ramp retracted behind them. The ship's interior was utilitarian but well-maintained. A central corridor led to what appeared to be a cockpit, with doors on either side presumably leading to cargo holds and living quarters. Norella headed straight for the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat with practiced ease. "You said you had an arrangement with the captain," Jack noted as he took the co-pilot seat. "Where is he?" "She," Norella corrected, her fingers dancing across the control panels, initiating the launch sequence. "Is right here." Jack chuckled. "Should have guessed." The ship's engines hummed to life, and the external viewport displayed the docking bay doors opening above them. Outside, alarm lights began to flash. Someone had noticed the unauthorized departure. "We've been flagged," Jack warned, checking the scanner. "Vanguard patrols will be scrambled within minutes." Norella didn't respond, her focus entirely on the ship's controls. The Stellar Rogue lifted smoothly from the docking bay, rising toward the opening above. As they cleared the bay, Jack spotted Vanguard vehicles converging on their position. "We've got company," he said, reaching for the weapons controls. "Permission to return fire?" "Granted," Norella replied, banking the ship sharply to avoid the first volley of energy blasts from the pursuing vehicles. Jack targeted the lead Vanguard ship, firing a warning shot that passed just close enough to force the pilot to veer off course. "I'm guessing you'd prefer I don't actually hit them." Norella nodded. "Disabling Vanguard vessels escalates our situation from escape to active insurrection. I'd rather avoid that complication." Jack fired another strategic shot, creating a debris field that forced the pursuers to slow down. "You sound like someone who knows the Vanguard protocols well." "I know many things," Norella replied cryptically, pushing the ship's thrusters to maximum as they broke through Nexus Prime's upper atmosphere. "Including the fact that the cipher you're carrying is more important than either of us fully understand." The starfield opened before them as they left the planet's atmosphere, the vastness of space offering momentary sanctuary. Norella plotted a course away from the major space lanes, toward a region cluttered with asteroid debris that would help mask their energy signature. "The Vanguard ships aren't equipped for extended space pursuit," she explained. "But they'll alert their cruisers. We need to make a jump before they can establish a blockade." "Where to?" Jack asked. Norella hesitated. "That depends on what you intend to do with the cipher." Jack leaned back in his seat, considering his options. His employer had been vague about the package's contents, offering enough credits to suggest its value, but not enough information to indicate its purpose. Now, he was on a stolen ship with a blue-skinned woman who seemed to know far more than she was saying. "Originally," he said finally. "Deliver it and get paid. Now I'm thinking the situation has changed." "The cipher isn't just technology," Narella said, her voice softening slightly. "It's something older, something that predates the hegemony and even human expansion into this sector. It contains information that could shift the balance of power throughout known space." "And you want it because—" Narella's eyes met his. "Because in the wrong hands, it could be weaponized against species like mine. In the right hands, it could ensure our survival." Jack studied her, trying to detect any deception. "What exactly are you, Narella? I've encountered most known species in my travels, but I've never seen anyone quite like you." "My people are rare now," she explained, adjusting their course slightly to navigate deeper into the asteroid field. "We come from a world called Azura, in a system that was absorbed by the hegemony centuries ago. Those who wouldn't submit were either eliminated or scattered across the stars." "And which category do you fall into?" A small, sad smile crossed her face. "I was born in exile. I've never seen my ancestral home except in historical archives." The ship's proximity alarm interrupted their conversation. A large vessel had appeared on the edge of their scanner range, a Vanguard cruiser, moving to intercept their projected course. "They're faster than expected," Narella muttered, altering their trajectory. "We need to jump now, even without a clear destination." Jack leaned forward, examining the star chart displayed on the navigation console. "Here," he said, pointing to a small, unremarkable system off the main trade routes. "Cygnus. There's a research outpost there. Minimal hegemony presence. Mostly independent scientists who pay for privacy." Narella raised an eyebrow. "You've been there?" "Delivered supplies a few times. The head researcher, Dr. Voss, appreciates discretion. He might shelter us, for a price." She considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Setting course for Cygnus." As Narella prepared the jump sequence, Jack extracted the cipher from his pocket. The small black box seemed unremarkable. No markings. No obvious way to open it. Nothing to suggest its supposedly immense value. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its negligible weight. "What does it do, exactly?" he asked. Narella glanced at the box. "It contains genetic algorithms developed by an ancient civilization. Algorithms that can modify biology at its most fundamental level." "Sounds like advanced medical technology. Valuable, sure, but worth all this trouble?" "It's more than medical technology. Jack?" Narella's voice took on an intensity he hadn't heard before. "It doesn't just heal. It transforms. The cipher can rewrite genetic code completely, create hybrid species, or alter existing ones beyond recognition. In the hegemony's hands, it would become a tool for biological warfare and forced evolution." Jack whistled softly. "And in your hands?" "Protection. Restoration." Her eyes fixed on the black box. "My people are dying out. Our genetic diversity is too limited after centuries of diaspora. The cipher might be our only hope for survival." The jump drive powered up, creating the familiar pre-jump vibration throughout the ship. Jack secured the cipher in his pocket again, unsure whether to fully trust Narella's explanation, but increasingly certain that delivering the package to his original employer would be a mistake. "Jump in 3, 2, 1. Narella counted down. Space distorted around them as the stellar rogue entered hyperspace, leaving the Vanguard cruiser and Nexus Prime far behind. The familiar streaking effect of faster-than-light travel filled the viewport, casting both of them in ethereal blue light. 8 hours to Cygnus, Narella said, leaning back in her chair for the first time since they'd boarded. "You should rest. I'll monitor the jump." Jack shook his head. "You've been running longer than I have. I'll take first watch. Besides, I'm not quite ready to sleep on a ship with someone who was holding a gun on Krell mercenaries a few hours ago." A genuine smile crossed Norella's face. Fair point. She stood, stretching slightly. There's food in the galley if you're hungry. I'll check the weapon systems before I rest. As she moved past his chair, Jack caught her wrist gently. One question before you go. Those Krell, they were after the cipher too, weren't they? Norella's expression darkened. The Krell are mercenaries for hire. Someone wanted to ensure I never made the rendezvous with you. Any idea who? Several possibilities. The hegemony uses proxies when they want deniability. Or it could be another faction entirely. The cipher has many interested parties. Jack released her wrist. Great. So we've potentially got the Vanguard, Krell mercenaries, and unknown third parties all wanting to separate us from this little box. Anything else I should know? Norella hesitated. The cipher responds to proximity with certain genetic markers. My people are one such marker. If I remain close to it for too long, it may activate. Activate how? I'm not entirely sure, she admitted. The historical records are incomplete, but it's said to form a bond with compatible biology. Jack raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. It's why I need to reach my people with it as soon as possible. They have the knowledge to control the process. She moved toward the door. I'll be in the weapons bay if you need me. After she left, Jack examined the ship's systems more thoroughly. The Stellar Rogue was impressively equipped for a vessel its size. Advanced weapons, reinforced shields, and engine modifications that gave it speed beyond civilian specifications. Norella was clearly no ordinary refugee. He thought about the cipher in his pocket and her explanation of its capabilities. If she was telling the truth, the device represented power beyond measure, the ability to reshape life itself. No wonder so many factions were willing to kill for it. Jack had always prided himself on his pragmatism. Take the job, deliver the goods, collect payment, repeat. The details rarely concerned him. But this time felt different. The cipher's potential for destruction or salvation weighed on him, as did Norella's obvious desperation to secure it for her people. Hours passed as the Stellar Rogue continued its hyperspace journey. Jack checked the ship's scanners periodically, but there was no sign of pursuit. Eventually, fatigue began to catch up with him. He set the proximity alarms to maximum sensitivity and left the cockpit in search of coffee or its equivalent. He found the galley easily enough, a small but functional space with basic food preparation equipment. As he rummaged through the supplies, he heard a sound from one of the adjacent rooms. Following it, he discovered Norella in what appeared to be a small training area, moving through what looked like martial arts forms. Her movements were fluid and precise, her blue skin gleaming with exertion. Jack watched silently from the doorway, impressed by her discipline and grace. She completed a complex sequence before acknowledging his presence. I thought you were monitoring the jump, she said, reaching for a towel to wipe her face. Autopilot's handling it. Thought I'd find some caffeine? He leaned against the doorframe. Those moves aren't standard military training. They're Azuran combat forms, passed down through generations. She took a drink from a water container. How long were you watching? Long enough to know I wouldn't want to face you in a fair fight. Jack grinned. Fortunately, I rarely fight fair. Norella almost smiled. A trait that served you well at the Cosmic Drift. Speaking of which, Jack said, growing more serious. I've been thinking about what happened there. The timing seems suspiciously convenient. You waiting for a courier with the cipher, me arriving with exactly that, and the Krell showing up to complicate things. You suspect a setup? I always suspect a setup. It's kept me alive this long. Jack crossed his arms. My employer didn't mention you specifically. Just said to deliver the package to a buyer at the Drift and collect payment. Who was your employer? A broker called Malik. Operates out of the Centauri system. Specializes in rare artifacts and technology. Never asked questions before. Norella's expression shifted subtly. Malik is known to work with the hegemony occasionally. It's possible this was a trap from the beginning, a way to draw me out. So I was bait? Jack frowned. That would explain the minimal information and the unusually high payment offer. The question is, Norella said, stepping closer, now that you know what's at stake, where do your loyalties lie? Jack met her gaze steadily. I'm loyal to whoever pays me, but I'm also not fond of being used as bait. If Malik set me up, our arrangement is void as far as I'm concerned. And the cipher? That depends on what you're offering instead. Norella considered this. I can match whatever Malik promised you. My people have resources, even in exile. Credits are useful, Jack acknowledged. But they won't mean much if the Vanguard catches us with a device that can rewrite biology. I'm more interested in survival at this point. Then our interests align, Norella said. At least until we reach Cygnus. A sudden lurch of the ship interrupted their conversation. The lights flickered, and an alarm blared from the cockpit. They exchanged a brief look before rushing back to the bridge. The hyperspace distortion outside the viewport had changed, rippling in ways that suggested instability in the jump field. Jack slid into the pilot's seat, quickly assessing the situation. Something's forced us out of hyperspace, he announced, hands flying over the controls. Some kind of interdiction technology. Norella checked the scanner. Vanguard cruiser, approaching fast. They must have predicted our jump trajectory. The ship shuddered again as they fully reverted to normal space. The stars reappeared around them, no longer streaked by faster-than-light travel. In the distance, a massive hegemony vessel loomed, its weapon systems visibly powering up. Incoming transmission, Norella reported. A stern voice filled the cockpit. Unidentified vessel. This is Commander Vex of the Hegemony Vanguard cruiser Indomitable. You are harboring a fugitive and stolen property. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Jack cut the transmission. Any suggestions? Norella was already plotting a new course. Cygnus is still 2 hours away at maximum sublight speed. We need a diversion. Jack studied the tactical display, noting a nearby asteroid field. Those rocks might give us some cover, but we'd be gambling with the ship's integrity. The Stellar Rogue can handle it. Reinforced hull, enhanced shields. Norella's fingers danced across the navigation controls. The real question is whether you can pilot through that debris field better than they can. Jack grinned. I never could resist a challenge. He took manual control, pushing the ship's engines to maximum as they raced toward the asteroid field. Behind them, the Vanguard cruiser launched smaller pursuit craft, faster and more maneuverable than their main vessel. They're deploying interceptors, Norella warned, moving to the weapons console. 6. No. 8 craft, armed and closing fast. Hold them off as long as you can, Jack replied, his focus entirely on the approaching asteroid field. I need at least 2 minutes to reach those rocks. Norella targeted the lead interceptors, firing precise shots that forced them to break formation without causing critical damage. The Stellar Rogue's weapons were impressive for a ship its size, but they were still outgunned and outnumbered. Energy blasts from the pursuit craft rocked their ship, shields absorbing most of the impact, but gradually weakening. Jack weaved through the barrage, pushing the engines beyond recommended limits. The asteroid field loomed larger in the viewport, a chaotic maze of spinning rocks that offered both sanctuary and peril. 30 seconds to entry, Jack called. Divert power from non-essential systems to shields and engines. Norella made the adjustments, and the ship surged forward with renewed speed. The first asteroids passed on either side of them, and Jack's world narrowed to the space directly ahead. His hands moved instinctively, guiding the Stellar Rogue through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, around masses of rock that would crush them instantly on impact. Behind them, the pursuit craft hesitated at the edge of the field. Some followed, while others maintained position, presumably to track their exit point. They're splitting up, Norella reported, 4 in pursuit. 4 establishing a perimeter. Good, Jack replied, not taking his eyes off the asteroid dance before him. Fewer to deal with in here. The ship shuddered as a smaller rock glanced off their shields. Jack compensated immediately, diving beneath a larger asteroid and using its mass to shield them from the pursuers' scanners. I'm going to cut main power for 60 seconds, he said. Let them pass us by. Narella nodded, initiating the power-down sequence. The ship went dark, drifting silently among the asteroids, with only minimal life support systems operating. Through the viewport, they watched as 2 of the pursuit craft passed nearby, scanning for their signature but finding nothing. Clever, Narella acknowledged. But they'll establish a blockade around the field. We still need to reach Cygnus. Jack reactivated the systems, keeping power levels low. We're not going straight there. That's what they'll expect. He pointed to a small moon on the navigation display, orbiting a gas giant in a neighboring system. We'll slingshot around that, using its gravity to accelerate. It'll throw off their calculations and give us a speed boost. That'll add another hour to our journey. Better than not reaching our destination at all. Narella didn't argue, and Jack guided the ship through the remainder of the asteroid field, at minimal power. They emerged on the opposite side from where the Vanguard perimeter had been established, immediately changing course toward the gas giant Jack had identified. The diversionary tactic worked. By the time the Vanguard realized they had escaped the asteroid field, the stellar rogue was already approaching the gas giant's moon, using its substantial gravity well to accelerate their course toward Cygnus. The maneuver required precise calculations and timing, pushing the ship's structural integrity to its limits as they swung around the moon at tremendous speed. As they straightened out on their new trajectory, both Jack and Narella released breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. The immediate danger had passed, though the Vanguard would undoubtedly continue searching. That was impressive piloting, Narella admitted. Jack allowed himself a small smile. I didn't spend all those years smuggling just for the charming company. A comfortable silence fell between them as the ship continued toward Cygnus. Jack used the time to check the cipher, ensuring it hadn't been damaged during their escape. The black box remained unchanged, still sealed and mysterious. You mentioned it responds to proximity with certain genetic markers, he said, turning the box over in his hands. Your genetic markers, specifically. Has it shown any signs of activation? Narella frowned slightly. Nothing obvious, but... She hesitated. I've been feeling strange since we left Nexus Prime. A heightened awareness, increased sensitivity to light and sound. It could be nothing, just stress and adrenaline. Jack studied her more carefully. Now that she mentioned it, the blue of her skin seemed more vibrant than before, and the silver pinpoints in her eyes appeared brighter. Maybe we should keep this in a secure container until we reach Dr. Voss, he suggested, returning the cipher to his pocket. Just to be safe. Narella nodded, though she seemed reluctant. There's a shielded compartment in the cargo hold. It might help minimize any effects. They secured the cipher in the compartment, which Narella explained was designed to contain sensitive materials during transport. Whether it would shield whatever signal the device might be emitting remained to be seen, but it seemed a reasonable precaution. As they returned to the cockpit, Jack noticed Narella swaying slightly, her hand bracing against the wall for support. Are you all right? He asked, concerned despite himself. Just tired, she replied, though her voice sounded strained. I'll be fine. Jack wasn't convinced, but he didn't press the issue. They resumed their positions on the bridge, monitoring the long-range scanners for any sign of pursuit, while the ship continued its journey to Cygnus. Hours passed in relative calm. Narella grew increasingly quiet, her attention seemingly focused inward. Jack found himself watching her with growing concern, noting the subtle changes in her appearance. The blue of her skin now pulsed faintly, as if lit from within, and a fine sheen of sweat had formed on her brow despite the ship's regulated temperature. "We should talk about what happens when we reach Cygnus," he said finally, breaking the silence. "I know Dr. Voss, but he's not exactly a humanitarian. He'll want something in exchange for his help." Narella nodded distantly. "Credits? Information?" "Probably information. He's a xenobiologist, specializes in comparative alien physiology. Someone like you," Jack gestured toward her unique appearance, "would definitely interest him." "My people are not laboratory specimens," Narella said sharply, then winced as if the burst of emotion had caused her pain. Jack leaned forward. "You're getting worse. What's happening to you?" She closed her eyes briefly. "The cipher. Even from the cargo hold. I can feel it. Reaching for me. Changing me." "Should we jettison it?" Jack asked, genuinely alarmed now. "No!" Narella's eyes snapped open. The silver points now expanded into bright rings. "It's too valuable. Too important." She took a deep breath, visibly struggling for control. "Besides, the connection has already been established. Separating us now might cause more harm than good." The proximity alert sounded, indicating they were approaching the Cygnus system. Jack turned his attention to the controls, beginning deceleration procedures, while keeping a wary eye on Narella. Whatever was happening to her seemed to be accelerating. The Cygnus research outpost came into view, a collection of interconnected modules orbiting a small, rocky planetoid. It lacked the imposing presence of hegemony facilities, with no visible weapon systems or military vessels in the vicinity. Instead, several civilian science ships were docked at various points around the structure. Jack opened a communication channel. "Cygnus Outpost. This is Jack Evans aboard the private transport Stellar Rogue, requesting emergency docking for medical assistance." After a moment's pause, a response came through. "Stellar Rogue, this is Cygnus Control. State the nature of your medical emergency and provide identification." Jack glanced at Narella, who was now visibly trembling, her skin glowing with an internal blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "My companion is experiencing severe physiological distress. Unknown cause, possibly related to a rare genetic condition. We need immediate access to xenobiological expertise." Another pause, then, "Transmit your identification codes for verification." Jack sent his trading credentials, legitimate ones he kept for emergency situations like this, along with a personal message for Dr. Voss. The wait seemed interminable as Narella's condition deteriorated further. She was now hunched forward in her seat, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to contain something within. Finally, the response came. "Cleared for docking at Bay 3. Medical team will meet you there." Jack guided the ship toward the designated bay, watching as the docking clamps extended to secure them. As soon as the airlock indicators turned green, he moved to help Narella from her seat. She leaned heavily against him, her skin hot to the touch now, the glow pulsing faster. "The cipher," she whispered urgently. "Don't tell them about it." "Let's worry about keeping you alive first," Jack replied, supporting her weight as they moved toward the airlock. The doors opened to reveal a small medical team, led by a tall, thin man with silver hair and calculating eyes behind rimless spectacles. Dr. Varric Voss had aged since Jack last saw him, but his commanding presence remained unchanged. "Jack Evans," the doctor said, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had learned multiple alien languages before mastering human speech. "Your message mentioned a medical emergency." His eyes shifted to Narella, widening slightly at the sight of her glowing skin. "Fascinating." "Help now, fascination later," Jack snapped. "She's getting worse by the minute." Dr. Voss nodded to his team, who brought forward a hovering stretcher. As they transferred Narella onto it, Voss scanned her with a handheld device, his expression growing increasingly intrigued. "Azuran physiology," he murmured. "Extremely rare. And these readings? Extraordinary cellular activity. They moved quickly, through the station's corridors, toward what Voss identified as his private laboratory. Norella drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words in a language Jack didn't recognize. The glow beneath her skin continued to pulse, now forming patterns that resembled circuit pathways across her exposed arms and face. The laboratory was state-of-the-art, filled with equipment Jack couldn't begin to identify. The medical team transferred Norella to an examination platform in the center of the room, where multiple scanning devices immediately activated, bathing her in various colored lights. "What happened to her?" Dr. Voss demanded, studying the data flowing across multiple screens. Jack hesitated, weighing his options. Norella had warned him not to mention the cipher, but Voss needed information to help her. "She was exposed to an artifact," he said finally. "Something that interacts with specific genetic markers. Her people's markers." Voss looked up sharply. "What kind of artifact?" "Ancient technology, pre-hegemony. That's all I know." The doctor's eyes narrowed skeptically, but he returned his attention to Norella as she suddenly convulsed on the platform, her back arching as the blue glow intensified. "Her cellular structure is being rewritten," Voss announced, fingers flying across control panels. "At a rate I've never witnessed before. It's as if her DNA is being optimized." "Is she dying?" Jack asked bluntly. "Quite the opposite. I think she's evolving." Voss adjusted several settings on his equipment. "But the process is too rapid, causing severe stress to her systems. I need to stabilize her." He administered a series of injections, explaining that they would slow the cellular changes without stopping them completely. Gradually, Norella's convulsions subsided, though the glow beneath her skin continued to pulse steadily. "She'll need constant monitoring," Voss said, stepping back from the platform. "Now, perhaps you'd like to tell me what you're really involved in, Jack? The Vanguard doesn't usually pursue smugglers with such enthusiasm." Jack tensed. "What do you know about the Vanguard?" "This station monitors all nearby space traffic. A hegemony cruiser entered this sector a few hours ago, along with several pursuit craft. Their communication channels mentioned fugitives with stolen technology." Voss smiled thinly. "It doesn't take a genius to connect those dots. We need Sanctuary, Varric, just until she stabilizes and we can move on." "Sanctuary costs. Jack, you know that." The doctor gestured toward Norella. "She's payment enough. The opportunity to study an Azuran during this kind of transformation is priceless." Jack's hand moved instinctively toward his blaster. "She's not a lab specimen." Voss raised an eyebrow. "Protective already. Interesting," he sighed. "Relax, Jack. I'm not suggesting dissection, merely observation and data collection while I help stabilize her condition. In return, you get sanctuary and medical assistance." Before Jack could respond, one of Voss's assistants approached with urgent news. "Doctor, we're detecting another change in her biology. Some kind of growth in the abdominal cavity." They returned to Norella's side, where the scanning equipment now displayed a new concentration of activity in her midsection. Dr. Voss adjusted the scanners, his expression shifting from scientific curiosity to genuine surprise. "This is unexpected," he murmured. "What is it?" Jack demanded. Voss looked up, his eyes wide with wonder and professional excitement. "She's pregnant. Or rather, something analogous to pregnancy is occurring. A cellular mass is forming, developing at an accelerated rate." Jack stared at the doctor in disbelief. "That's impossible. She wasn't pregnant when we left Nexus Prime." "Conventional pregnancy? No. But this isn't conventional." Voss pointed to the scanning display, where a small, glowing form was clearly visible within Norella's abdomen. "This is being generated by whatever process is rewriting her DNA. It's as if the artifact you mentioned is creating new life using her as a template. The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. The cipher wasn't just altering Norella. It was using her to create something new, something potentially dangerous. "Can you remove it?" he asked. Voss shook his head. "Not without killing her. The processes are interconnected now. Whatever this is, it's part of her transformation." Norella stirred on the platform, her eyes fluttering open. The silver rings had expanded further, nearly eliminating the black. She reached weakly for Jack's hand. "It's happening," she whispered. "The cipher is fulfilling its purpose." "You knew this would happen?" Jack asked, taking her hand despite his reservations. "Not exactly. Our records spoke of transformation, of new life. But the details were lost." Her grip tightened suddenly, surprisingly strong. "I need the cipher. Bring it to me." Jack hesitated, glancing at Dr. Voss, who was watching their exchange with undisguised interest. "Go," Voss said. "I'll continue monitoring her. Whatever you have on your ship that's causing this, it may help me understand how to stabilize her condition." Jack reluctantly left the laboratory, hurrying back to the stellar rogue. The ship remained undisturbed, the shielded compartment in the cargo hold still sealed. He retrieved the cipher, noting that the black box now felt warm to the touch, vibrating subtly as if responding to some unseen energy. As he made his way back through the station, Jack noticed increased activity among the staff. Security personnel moved with purpose, checking identification and securing access points. Something had changed during his brief absence. "What's happening?" he asked a passing technician. "Unidentified vessel approaching," the man replied nervously. "Station director has ordered security protocols." Jack quickened his pace, the cipher secured in his inner pocket. If the Vanguard had found them, their sanctuary wouldn't last long. Cygnus Station had no meaningful defenses against a military cruiser. When he reached the laboratory, he found Norella sitting upright on the examination platform. Dr. Voss, hovering nearby with a mixture of caution and fascination on his face. "Her strength is returning," Voss explained as Jack entered. "And the cellular changes have stabilized into a new pattern. It's remarkable." Norella's appearance had indeed changed. Her blue skin now had subtle patterns across its surface, similar to circuitry, but more organic in design. The glow had dimmed to a faint luminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breathing. Her eyes remained altered, the silver rings now dominant. "Jack," she said, her voice stronger than before, "you brought it." He approached cautiously, extracting the cipher from his pocket. The black box was definitely warmer now, the vibration increasing as it came closer to Norella. "There's a Vanguard ship approaching the station," he told them. "We don't have much time." Dr. Voss moved to a communication panel. "I'll speak with the station director. We may be able to delay them briefly." As he stepped away, Norella extended her hand for the cipher. Jack hesitated only briefly before placing it in her palm. The moment she touched it, the box's surface shifted, lines appearing across its previously smooth exterior. The lines matched the patterns now visible on Norella's skin. "It recognizes me," she said softly. "The connection is complete." The box opened in her hands, revealing not a technological core as Jack had expected, but what appeared to be a small crystal, pulsing with the same blue light that emanated from Norella's skin. "This is the true cipher," she explained, holding the crystal carefully. "The essence of my people's ancient knowledge, stored in crystalline form." The box was merely its protection. "And what does it do?" Jack asked, watching as the crystal's glow intensified in her hands. "It restores. It creates. It evolves." Norella placed the crystal against her abdomen, where the scanning equipment had detected the growing cellular mass. "And now, it completes its purpose." The crystal seemed to melt into her body, the blue light spreading outward from the point of contact until her entire form was illuminated from within. Jack stepped back, shielding his eyes from the sudden brightness. When the light dimmed enough for him to see again, Narella stood before him, transformed yet again. The patterns on her skin were more pronounced now, shifting subtly as if alive. Her eyes had returned to their original appearance, mostly black with silver pinpoints, but carried a depth that hadn't been there before. Most strikingly, a faint blue field of energy surrounded her, extending about a centimeter from her skin. "What happened?" Jack asked, both awed and unnerved by the change. "Integration," Narella replied, her voice carrying a resonant quality it hadn't possessed before. "The cipher is part of me now, and I am part of it. And the child." She placed a hand on her abdomen. "The child will be the first of a new generation, a bridge between past and future." And Dr. Voss returned, his expression grave. "The Vanguard cruiser is demanding we surrender the fugitives. They're threatening to board the station by force." He paused, staring at Narella's transformed appearance. "What have you done?" "What was necessary," she replied calmly. "How long before they board?" "Minutes at most. The station director is stalling, but they're preparing boarding parties." Jack checked his blaster, though he doubted it would be much use against Vanguard troops in full combat gear. "We need to get back to the ship." Narella nodded. "Dr. Voss, you should come with us. The Vanguard won't believe you weren't involved." Voss looked conflicted, glancing around at his laboratory and the valuable research it contained. "Everything I've worked for is here. Everything will be confiscated when the Vanguard realizes what you've been studying." Jack pointed out. Unauthorized xenobiology research isn't exactly smiled upon by the hegemony. The station's alarm system activated, its wailing klaxon confirming what they already knew. The Vanguard had begun their boarding operation. Voss made his decision quickly, gathering a small case of what Jack assumed were essential research materials. "There's a maintenance tunnel that leads directly to the docking bays," the doctor said, moving to a concealed panel in the laboratory wall. "It bypasses the main corridors." The panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Voss led the way, with Jack following and Narella bringing up the rear. As they moved through the dimly lit tunnel, Jack could hear the distant sounds of Vanguard troops entering the station, the clatter of armored boots on metal flooring, barked orders, and the occasional shout of alarm from station personnel. "How far to the docking bay?" Jack asked in a hushed voice. 200 meters, Voss replied. "This tunnel was designed for maintenance drones, not humans. It'll be tight in places." They continued forward, the passage narrowing at points so that they had to turn sideways to progress. Jack kept his blaster ready, though the confined space would make any firefight suicidal. Behind them, the sounds of the Vanguard boarding party grew louder. They had clearly discovered the laboratory and Narella's absence. It wouldn't take them long to check the station's security systems and identify the maintenance tunnel. "They're coming," Narella said, her voice surprisingly calm. "I can sense them." Jack glanced back, noting that the blue field around her had intensified slightly. "Can you do anything with that?" he asked, gesturing toward the energy field. "I'm still learning what I'm capable of," she replied. "But yes, I think so." They reached a junction in the tunnel where it widened enough for them to stand comfortably. Voss consulted a small schematic on his datapad. "The docking bay is just ahead. But there's a problem." He pointed to a blinking indicator on the display. "The Vanguard has already secured that section. They'll be waiting for us." Jack cursed under his breath. "Options?" "Limited," Voss admitted. "All other routes would take too long." The sound of armored boots in the tunnel behind them grew louder. The Vanguard had found their escape route and were closing in quickly. Narella stepped forward. "I'll handle this, both the pursuers and those ahead." Before Jack could protest, she moved to the center of the junction, closing her eyes in concentration. The blue field around her expanded dramatically, forming a sphere that encompassed all three of them. As the field touched Jack, he felt a strange sensation, like static electricity but somehow soothing rather than jarring. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Creating a shield," Narella explained, her eyes still closed. "The cipher's energy, channeled through my biology. It should protect us long enough to reach the ship." The first Vanguard troops appeared at the end of the tunnel behind them, their weapons raised. They fired immediately, but the energy bolts dissipated harmlessly against Narella's blue field. "Move," she commanded. "I'll hold the shield, but I need to concentrate." They continued forward, Narella's shield moving with them, like a protective bubble. More shots from behind struck the barrier, each one causing Narella to wince slightly, but failing to penetrate. They reached the end of the maintenance tunnel, where a hatch opened onto the docking bay. As expected, Vanguard troops were positioned throughout the area, with a particular concentration near the Stellar Rogue. At the head of the boarding party stood a tall, imposing figure in ornate armor, Commander Vex, the officer who had pursued them from Nexus Prime. "We can't fight our way through all of them," Jack said, assessing the situation. "Even with your shield." "We don't need to fight," Narella replied. "Just reach the ship." She expanded the shield further, creating an elongated bubble that extended from the maintenance hatch toward the Stellar Rogue's docking ramp. The moment they emerged, the Vanguard troops opened fire, their energy weapons creating a light show as they struck the blue barrier from all sides. Narella staggered slightly under the assault, but kept moving forward, the shield holding despite the barrage. Jack and Voss stayed close behind her, watching in amazement as they advanced through the hail of fire unharmed. Commander Vex's voice boomed across the docking bay. "Cease fire! You're wasting energy!" He stepped forward, studying the blue shield with narrow eyes. "So, the rumors were true. The Azuran woman has bonded with the cipher." Narella continued moving toward the ship, not responding to Vex's taunt. Jack could see strain in her face now. Maintaining the shield against so many weapons was taking its toll. "You can't escape. Narella," Vex called. "Even if you reach your ship, we'll shoot you down before you clear the station." They were halfway to the Stellar Rogue now. The Vanguard troops had ceased firing on Vex's order, but remained in position, weapons trained on the blue shield. Jack noticed that some of the troops were moving to block their path more directly, forming a physical barrier between them and the ship. "They're going to try to overwhelm the shield with numbers," he warned Narella. "Can you hold against physical contact?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice strained. "The energy responds to threat, but I've never tested its limits." As they approached the line of troops, Commander Vex raised his hand, signaling his forces to advance. The soldiers moved forward as one, energy weapons replaced with shock batons designed for close-quarter combat. "Jack," Narella gasped, clearly struggling now. "The shield won't hold against all of them." Making a split-second decision, Jack raised his blaster and fired, not at the troops, but at the docking bay's environmental control panel. The shot struck true, destroying the panel in a shower of sparks. Immediately, warning lights flashed throughout the bay as the atmospheric containment field began to fail. "Emergency protocols!" Voss shouted, understanding Jack's plan. "The station will seal the bay to prevent decompression." The Vanguard troops hesitated, caught between their orders and self-preservation as the bay's atmospheric pressure began to drop. Commander Vex shouted commands, trying to maintain order. But the sudden threat of explosive decompression created momentary chaos. Jack seized the opportunity, grabbing Narella's arm and pulling her forward, with Voss close behind. They broke through the disorganized line of troops, racing toward the Stellar Rogue as emergency bulkheads began to descend around the docking bay's perimeter. "The ship!" Jack yelled over the screaming alarms. "We have to get inside before the bay seals." They reached the Stellar Rogue's ramp, just as the station's computer announced imminent decompression. Norella's shield had contracted to a thin layer around her body, her strength clearly fading. Jack helped her up the ramp while Voss scrambled ahead to initiate the ship's launch sequence. Commander Vex and several of his troops gave chase, firing wildly as they ran. One shot grazed Jack's shoulder, spinning him halfway around but not stopping his forward momentum. He returned fire, forcing their pursuers to dive for cover and buying precious seconds. Inside the ship, Voss had already reached the cockpit and begun the engine startup procedure. Jack sealed the entry ramp behind them, then helped Norella to a seat in the main cabin. "Can you hold on?" he asked, concerned by her pallor and labored breathing. "Go," she managed. "Fly us out of here." Jack raced to the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's seat beside Voss. Through the viewport, he could see the docking bay in chaos, emergency force fields activating as the bulkheads completed their descent, Vanguard troops retreating from the depressurizing area, and Commander Vex's furious face as he realized his quarry was escaping. "Docking clamps are still engaged," Voss warned, pointing to the status display. Jack activated the emergency release, a feature installed by smugglers to allow quick departures in exactly this kind of situation. The clamps disengaged with a violent shudder, and the ship lurched free of its moorings. "Hold on!" Jack called, pushing the thrusters to maximum. The Stellar Rogue shot forward, barely clearing the narrowing gap of the emergency bulkhead before it sealed completely. They emerged into open space beyond the station, immediately banking hard to avoid the Vanguard cruiser looming nearby. "They're powering weapons," Voss reported, monitoring the scanner. The first volley from the cruiser passed dangerously close to their port side, the energy wake buffeting the smaller vessel. Jack pushed the engines beyond safety limits, weaving erratically to present a difficult target while plotting a jump trajectory away from the station. Behind them, the Vanguard cruiser launched pursuit craft, the same sleek interceptors that had chased them at Nexus Prime. Jack cursed. They wouldn't have time to calculate a proper jump before those ships caught up to them. "We need more speed," he muttered, trying to coax additional power from the straining engines. Norella appeared in the cockpit doorway, supporting herself against the frame. Despite her obvious exhaustion, the blue energy still flickered around her like a fading aura. "I can help," she said, moving unsteadily toward them. "The Cypher's energy. I can channel it into the ship's systems." "That sounds dangerously experimental," Voss observed, though his scientific curiosity was evident in his tone. "We're out of options," Jack replied, guiding the ship through another evasive maneuver as energy weapons fire blazed past them. "Do it, Norella!" She placed her hands on the ship's control panel, closing her eyes in concentration. The blue energy surrounding her flowed outward, spreading across the console and into the ship's systems. The cockpit lighting flickered, then stabilized at a higher intensity. Engine readouts spiked well beyond their maximum ratings. The Stellar Rogue lurched forward with sudden, incredible acceleration, leaving the pursuit craft behind in an instant. The stars outside the viewport began to blur as they approached speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel this size. "This is remarkable," Voss exclaimed, watching the ship's systems operate beyond all normal parameters. "She's somehow optimizing the energy conversion throughout the entire propulsion system." Jack focused on piloting, fighting to maintain control as the ship responded with newfound power and sensitivity. Behind them, the Vanguard cruiser fired its main weapons, but the energy bolts fell short as the distance between the vessels rapidly increased. "Jump calculations complete," Jack announced. "Norella, can you maintain this connection through a hyperspace transition?" "I think so," she replied, her voice strained but determined. "But I can't hold it much longer." Initiating jump in 3, 2, 1. The familiar distortion of hyperspace enveloped them, the stars stretching into streaks of light as the Stellar Rogue left normal space. The transition was rougher than usual, the ship shuddering violently as Norella's energy interface interacted with the jump drive in ways never intended by its designers. Once they were safely in hyperspace, Norella collapsed, the blue energy dissipating from around her. Jack caught her before she hit the floor, easing her into the co-pilot seat. "That was impressive," he said, checking her pulse and finding it rapid but strong. "The cipher's potential is greater than even my people realized," she murmured, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. "But using it takes a toll." Dr. Voss moved forward with a medical scanner, running it over Norella's body. "Your vital signs are stabilizing, but you need rest." He paused, studying the scanner with interest. "The cellular mass, the child, it's continuing to develop, at an accelerated rate, but more stable now." "How long until we reach safety?" Norella asked, looking to Jack. He checked the navigation console. "At our current speed, which is about twice what this ship should be capable of, we'll reach the outer colonies in approximately 12 hours. There's a research outpost in the Andromeda sector that doesn't ask questions. We can find sanctuary there while we figure out our next move." Norella nodded, her hand moving to rest on her abdomen. 12 hours should be enough. The child will be ready by then." "Ready?" Jack questioned. "You mean born?" "The cipher accelerates biological processes," Dr. Voss explained, still studying his scanner readings. "What would normally take months is happening in hours. It's extraordinary." "And dangerous," Norella added. "This isn't a natural pregnancy. The child will be something new, a hybrid of my biology and the cipher's technology. The first of a new generation." Jack leaned back in his seat, trying to process everything that had happened since he'd first encountered Norella at the Cosmic Drift. What had begun as a simple delivery had evolved into something he could never have anticipated. A transformation, a birth, a new beginning. "So what happens after the child is born?" he asked. "The Vanguard won't stop hunting us. The hegemony isn't known for giving up easily." "We'll need to reach my people," Norella replied. "There are hidden enclaves in the outer systems, beyond hegemony control. With the cipher integrated into my biology, and the child as living proof of its potential, we can finally begin rebuilding what was lost." "And you, Dr. Voss?" Jack turned to the scientist. "Still glad you came along." Voss smiled thinly. "The opportunity to study this transformation and birth, to document the creation of a new form of life. I'd have been a fool to stay behind." He gestured toward his case of research materials. "Besides, my most valuable work is here. The rest can be replaced." The ship continued its hyperspace journey, the hours passing in relative calm. Jack took turns with Voss monitoring the controls, while Norella rested in the ship's small medical bay. The changes in her body continued, subtle shifts in her physiological readings that Voss documented with scientific precision and barely contained excitement. Jack found himself drawn to the medical bay during his off shifts, sitting beside Norella as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness. The blue energy field had stabilized around her, a constant gentle glow that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "You didn't have to stay with me, you know," she said during one such visit, her eyes opening to find Jack watching her. "Once we reached Cygnus, you could have taken payment and gone your own way." Jack shrugged. "Seemed like a bad investment to abandon the most interesting job I've ever taken right before the finale." A small smile crossed her face. "Is that all this is to you? A job?" "It started that way," he admitted. "Now, I'm not sure what it is." Norella reached out, her hand finding his. The touch sent a small current of the blue energy through his skin. Not painful, but intense, like a connection being formed. "The cipher doesn't just transform biology," she said softly. "It transforms relationships, connections, possibilities. My people believed it was a gift from our ancestors, meant to ensure our survival in times of great change. And now it's doing that through you," Jack observed. "And through the child." She nodded, her free hand moving to her abdomen, where the subtle swell had grown visibly in just the few hours since their escape from Cygnus Station. The child will be born with the cipher's knowledge integrated into its very being, a perfect synthesis of biology and technology. Will it be human, Azuran, something else entirely? Something new, Narella replied. A bridge between worlds, between species, between past and future. Jack found himself both fascinated and unnerved by the concept. And you're okay with that? With being the vessel for this transformation? I volunteered, she said simply. My people have been dying out for generations. Our genetic diversity too limited. Our numbers too few. The cipher was our last hope. A way to adapt, to evolve beyond our limitations. Her eyes met his. I didn't expect to find an ally in a human smuggler. Though, Jack smiled wryly. I didn't expect to become one. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Voss, who entered the medical bay with his scanner in hand. Fascinating readings, he announced, moving to Narella's side. The child's development has reached what would normally be third trimester equivalent in just hours, and its neural activity. He shook his head in wonder. Unlike anything I've ever seen. Is there any danger? Jack asked, concerned despite himself. To Narella? Minimal. I believe the cipher's energy seems to be protecting both her and the child, optimizing the biological processes, rather than straining them. Voss adjusted several settings on the scanner. But I would recommend preparing for birth soon. The development rate suggests it could happen within the next few hours. Narella nodded calmly, as if she had already sensed this. The ship's medical bay is equipped for emergency procedures? Basic ones, yes, Voss confirmed. And with my expertise, we should be able to manage. Though I admit, I've never attended the birth of a hybrid human Azuran cipher child before. His scientific excitement was barely contained. Jack stood. I'll make sure we're on course and secure. The last thing we need is the Vanguard interrupting at the critical moment. He returned to the cockpit, checking the ship's systems and scanning for any sign of pursuit. The hyperspace journey continued undisturbed, but Jack knew better than to assume they were safe. The Vanguard had resources throughout the sector, and Commander Vex had seemed personally invested in capturing them. As he sat alone in the cockpit, watching the streaking lights of hyperspace through the viewport, Jack reflected on how completely his life had changed in less than a day. The cipher was no longer just cargo. It had become part of Narella, catalyst for a transformation he still didn't fully understand. And now, there would be a child, something unprecedented in human or Azuran history. What was his place in all this? Jack had always prided himself on his detachment, his ability to complete a job without becoming emotionally involved. Yet here he was, concerned for Narella's well-being, fascinated by the process unfolding in the medical bay, and even, though he was reluctant to admit it, protective of the unborn child. His thoughts were interrupted by an alarm from the navigation console. They were approaching a gravitational anomaly, something that hadn't appeared on their charts. Jack adjusted course to compensate, but the anomaly seemed to shift in response, as if deliberately positioning itself in their path. That's not possible, he muttered, checking the readings again. The anomaly was growing stronger, its gravitational pull beginning to affect their hyperspace trajectory. Jack activated the ship's emergency protocols, preparing for an unscheduled drop back to normal space. He opened the internal communication channel. Voss, Narella, secure yourselves. We're encountering some kind of disturbance in hyperspace. Might get rough. The ship shuddered violently as the anomaly's pull intensified. The hyperspace field around them began to distort, the familiar streaking lights taking on an unnatural, twisted appearance. Jack fought with the controls, trying to maintain their course, but it was like trying to sail through a hurricane. With a final, wrenching motion, the stellar rogue was pulled from hyperspace, emerging into normal space with a bone-jarring transition that sent warning alerts blaring throughout the ship. Jack struggled to stabilize their flight path, the vessel spinning dangerously as its systems recalibrated after the violent exit. "Status report," he shouted into the comm system, hoping Voss and Norella had secured themselves in time. "We're all right," came Voss's tense reply from the medical bay. "Norella is secure, but the transition has accelerated her condition. The birth process has begun." Jack cursed under his breath, dividing his attention between the ship's controls and the scanner readings. As the stellar rogue stabilized, he finally got a clear view of what had pulled them from hyperspace. "That's impossible," he whispered. Filling the viewport was the unmistakable form of the Vanguard cruiser, Indomitable. Commander Vex had somehow predicted their course and deployed a gravity well generator. Expensive, experimental technology designed specifically to interrupt hyperspace travel. "They found us," Jack announced grimly over the comm. "Vanguard cruiser, dead ahead. They used a gravity well to force us out of hyperspace." "How?" Voss demanded. "There's no way they could have calculated our exact trajectory." Jack's mind raced through possibilities. "A tracker. They must have placed it on the ship at Cygnus Station, probably during the confusion in the docking bay." The cruiser was already moving toward them, its massive form growing larger in the viewport. Smaller craft were launching from its bays, the same interceptors they had evaded before. This time, there would be no convenient asteroid field to hide in. "Jack," Norella's voice came through the comm, strained but determined. "Listen carefully. The cipher's energy. I can channel it one more time. To the jump drive." "You're in no condition," Jack began. "There's no alternative," she interrupted. "The child is coming, and we cannot let it fall into hegemony hands. I can create a surge, enough for one final jump. But you must be ready. The coordinates are in the navigation system already. My people's sanctuary." Jack checked the navigation computer and found the new coordinates, entered remotely, somehow, through Norella's connection with the ship's systems. They led to a region at the very edge of charted space, beyond hegemony control. "It'll burn out the drive," he warned, studying the energy requirements for such a jump from their current position. "Better than capture," Norella replied. The Vanguard interceptors were closing rapidly, their weapon systems powering up. The cruiser itself had activated its tractor beam, the energy field extending toward the stellar rogue like ghostly fingers reaching to snare them. "Do it," Jack decided. In the medical bay, Norella placed her hands on the wall, connecting to the ship's systems through the blue energy field that surrounded her. Jack felt the change immediately, power surging through the stellar rogue systems, bypassing safety protocols and regulatory circuits. The jump drive hummed with dangerous intensity, building toward a transition that it was never designed to perform. The ship's computer voiced urgent warnings. "Jump drive overload imminent. System failure predicted. Emergency shutdown recommended." Jack overrode the warnings, keeping the drive engaged as the Vanguard interceptors opened fire. Energy blasts struck the stellar rogue's shields, weakening them, but not yet breaking through. The tractor beam from the cruiser was seconds away from capturing them. "Now or never," Jack muttered, initiating the jump sequence. The transition hit like a physical blow. Normal space twisted around them, the jump drive screaming in protest as it forced open a hyperspace corridor under impossible conditions. Through the viewport, Jack saw the Vanguard cruiser and its interceptors distort and then vanish as the stellar rogue tore its way into hyperspace. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems overloaded and failed. The jump drive's housing was glowing white-hot, temperature warnings flashing across every console. But they were moving, faster than the ship had ever traveled before, hurtling through hyperspace toward the coordinates Norella had provided. "Norella!" Jack called over the comm. "Status!" When Dr. Voss answered, his voice was filled with a mixture of scientific wonder and genuine concern. The child is coming now. The jump transition triggered the final stage. And Jack? You should see this. Little busy preventing a core breach, Jack replied, fighting to stabilize the ship's failing systems. The jump drive was deteriorating by the second, its components never designed to channel the kind of energy Narella had pushed through them. If it failed completely while they were in hyperspace, they would be lost forever between dimensions. After several tense minutes of emergency rerouting and system bypasses, Jack managed to establish a tenuous stability. The ship was still traveling through hyperspace, albeit with half its systems offline or operating at minimal capacity. It would be enough to reach their destination, barely. With the immediate crisis averted, Jack set the autopilot and hurried back to the medical bay. The scene that greeted him was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Narella lay on the medical platform, surrounded by the blue energy field, which had expanded to fill much of the small chamber. Dr. Voss stood nearby, his scientific detachment momentarily forgotten as he watched the birth with undisguised awe. "Jack," Narella said, her voice stronger than he expected. "You're just in time." The energy field pulsed, brightening momentarily, and then began to concentrate around Narella's midsection. Jack moved closer, drawn by a curiosity that overrode his usual caution. Within the brightest part of the field, he could see movement, a small form taking shape, surrounded by the blue light. "The cipher's energy is facilitating the birth," Voss explained quietly, "creating a matrix that supports both biological and technological integration. There are no words in any language I know to adequately describe this process." With a final, intense pulse of light, the energy field contracted and then expanded outward in a gentle wave. As it receded, Jack saw the child for the first time, a small, perfect form nestled against Narella's chest. Its skin was a paler blue than its mother's, with subtle patterns, similar to the ones that now marked Narella's body. Its eyes, when they opened briefly, contained the same silver pinpoints in otherwise dark irises. "A girl," Narella said softly, cradling the newborn. "The first of a new generation." Jack approached cautiously, unsure of his place in this moment. The child seemed impossibly alert for a newborn, her tiny hands reaching upward with purpose, rather than the random movements of a typical infant. Around her body, a faint version of the blue energy field flickered and danced. "She carries the cipher within her," Narella explained, noting Jack's questioning gaze. "Not as a separate entity, but as part of her very being. Biology and technology, perfectly merged." "Is she healthy?" Jack asked, searching for an appropriate word. Dr. Voss approached with his scanner. "By any conventional standard, she is beyond healthy. Her cellular structure is remarkably advanced, and her neural activity—" He shook his head in amazement. "I would need to invent new terminology to properly describe it." The ship shuddered around them, a reminder that their escape was still precarious. Jack checked the nearest status display and frowned. "Jump drive is failing," he reported. "We'll reach the coordinates Narella set, but not much further. After that, we'll be on conventional propulsion only." "It will be enough," Narella assured him. "My people's sanctuary is hidden, a research colony established beyond hegemony space. They've been waiting for the cipher's return for generations." Jack looked at the child again, still trying to process everything that had happened. "And now they're getting something much more significant." Narella nodded, her expression solemn yet hopeful. "The beginning of our renewal. A way forward that none of us anticipated, but perhaps the path we were always meant to find." The hours that followed passed in a strange blur of tension and wonder. Jack divided his attention between the ship's failing systems and the remarkable child who seemed to grow and develop before his eyes. By the time they approached their destination, she was already showing cognitive and physical development far beyond a normal newborn. responding to voices, and even making sounds that seemed almost like attempts at communication. Dr. Voss documented everything with scientific precision, though even his considerable vocabulary seemed inadequate to describe what they were witnessing. "It's as if she's assimilating information from the environment itself," he theorized, after observing the child tracking complex movements with her eyes. "Learning at an exponential rate." The jump drive failed completely, just as they reached the outer boundary of the system Narella had directed them to. A binary star system, with several small planets orbiting at considerable distances. Jack guided the stellar rogue on conventional propulsion toward the fourth planet, following the navigation coordinates precisely. "Approaching destination," he announced over the ship's comm. "No signs of hegemony presence, but our sensors are operating at reduced capacity." "My people will have detected our arrival," Narella replied from the medical bay, where she remained with the child and Dr. Voss. "They maintain a sensor perimeter around the system." As if confirming her words, two small vessels appeared on their approach vector, sleek craft with design elements Jack didn't recognize. They took positions on either side of the stellar rogue, escorting rather than intercepting. "Stellar rogue, this is Azuran security." A voice came through the communication system, speaking the common trade language, but with an accent similar to Narella's. "Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Jack glanced at the comm panel, unsure how to respond, but Narella's voice answered from the medical bay, somehow patched directly into the ship's external communication system. "This is Narella, daughter of Lorene. I return bearing the cipher and its gift. Sanctuary Protocol, Azura 7-3. There was a moment of silence before the response came. The voice, now filled with barely contained excitement. "Narella, the cipher signals have been detected. You have succeeded where all others failed. Follow our escort to landing coordinates." The planet grew larger in the viewport, a world smaller than Earth, with vast oceans of deep purple and continents covered in vegetation that appeared silvery blue from orbit. The escort vessels guided them toward a region near the equator, where sensors detected a settlement nestled between mountain ranges. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jack got a clearer view of the Azuran colony. Unlike the harsh, industrial architecture of hegemony settlements, these structures seemed to grow organically from the landscape, their design incorporating living elements alongside technological ones. At the center stood a larger building that appeared to be made of crystalline material, similar to the cipher's core. "The Sanctuary," Narella said, having joined Jack in the cockpit with the child in her arms. She had recovered remarkably quickly from the birth, another apparent benefit of the cipher's integration with her biology. "The last gathering place of my people, those who escaped the hegemony's expansion and preserved our ancient knowledge." Jack guided the ship to the designated landing area, a circular platform that pulsed with the same blue energy he had now come to associate with the cipher and its effects. As the stellar rogue settled onto the platform, he noticed figures emerging from the surrounding structures, all with the distinctive blue skin of Narella's species. "What happens now?" he asked, powering down the ship's remaining systems. Narella looked at him, then at Dr. Voss, who had joined them. "Now you both have a choice. You've seen things few outsiders have witnessed, learned secrets that many would kill to possess." She paused, considering her words carefully. "My people will offer you sanctuary here, if you wish it, or passage to any system beyond hegemony reach." "And if we wanted to stay?" Jack found himself asking, surprising both Narella and himself with the question. "Then you would be welcome," she replied after a moment. "Though the path would not be easy. This is a new beginning for my people, but also a dangerous time. The hegemony will not stop searching for the cipher, for me, and now for my daughter." The child in her arms seemed to respond to these words, the blue energy around her brightening momentarily. Jack found his gaze drawn to the infant, marveling again at how alert and aware she seemed. how the patterns on her skin shifted subtly, as if responding to her thoughts. "What will you name her?" he asked. Narella smiled. "In my language, she would be called Elira, one who bridges worlds." She looked down at her daughter with profound tenderness. "It seems fitting, given her unique nature and the circumstances of her birth." Dr. Voss cleared his throat. "For my part, the opportunity to document this child's development and study the integration of the Sci-Fi's technology with living biology." His eyes gleamed with scientific enthusiasm. "I can think of no more important research in all of known space." Jack nodded, not surprised by the doctor's decision. Voss was, above all else, dedicated to knowledge and discovery. The Azuran sanctuary represented an unprecedented opportunity for his work. His own choice was less clear. Jack had spent his adult life avoiding attachments, moving from job to job with pragmatic detachment. The idea of settling in one place, especially one so removed from the trading routes and port cities he knew, was foreign to him. And yet, he looked at Narella and the child, Elira, feeling a connection he couldn't easily explain. Perhaps it was simply the extraordinary circumstances they had shared, or perhaps something deeper had formed during their brief but intense time together. The Sci-Fi's energy had touched him too, in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I think," he said finally, "I'd like to see where this goes, at least for a while." Narella's expression softened. "Then let's begin." They disembarked from the Stellar Rogue to find a welcoming committee of Azurans waiting at the base of the ramp. The leader, an older female with elaborate patterns across her blue skin, stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the child in Narella's arms. "The legends spoke true," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority and age. "The Sci-Fi has found its vessel and created new life from old knowledge." She bowed slightly to Narella. "You have done what many thought impossible, daughter of Lyrene." "Not alone," Narella replied, glancing at Jack and Dr. Voss. "Without these allies, I would never have succeeded. They have earned a place among us, if they choose to accept it." The elder studied the two humans with keen interest. "Outsiders have rarely been welcome to our sanctuary, but these are unprecedented times." She nodded solemnly. "If they have your trust, Narella, then they have ours." As they were led toward the central crystalline structure, Jack noticed the reverent way the gathered Azurans regarded Elira. The child, for her part, seemed to absorb everything around her with extraordinary awareness, her tiny hands reaching toward the blue energy patterns that flowed through the very architecture of the settlement. "Your daughter already communicates with our technology," the elder observed. "The Sci-Fi's knowledge flows through her in ways we have only theorized about in our ancient texts." "She is something new," Narella acknowledged. "Neither purely Azuran nor purely technological. A bridge between what we were and what we might become." They entered the central structure, where the crystalline walls pulsed with energy patterns similar to those Jack had seen in the Sci-Fi, and now in Elira's skin. The space opened into a vast chamber where dozens more Azurans waited, their expressions ranging from awe to cautious hope. "Today marks a new chapter for our people," the elder announced to the gathered assembly. "The Sci-Fi has returned to us, not as a device to be used, but as living knowledge embodied in this child, the beginning of our renewal." A murmur of excitement passed through the crowd. Jack stood slightly apart, feeling both privileged to witness this moment and acutely aware of his outsider status. Dr. Voss seemed similarly affected, though his attention was divided between the cultural significance of the event and his continued scientific observations of Elira's development. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Jack had experienced, a blend of ritual, technology, and biological connection that seemed to transcend the boundaries between them. The Azurans welcomed Elira into their community, through a process that involved both physical touch and the sharing of the blue energy that now connected them all. Hours later, as the binary stars set beyond the horizon, Jack found himself on a balcony overlooking the settlement. The structures glowed softly in the twilight, their biological-technological hybrid nature even more apparent in the darkness. "It's beautiful." Norella's voice came from behind him. She joined him at the railing, Elira sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Different from what you're used to, I imagine." Jack nodded. "Definitely not the usual smuggler's hangout." "Second thoughts about staying?" He considered the question honestly. "Not exactly. More like trying to find my place in all this. I'm used to clear objectives, defined parameters. This is..." He gestured toward the vista before them. "Open-ended." Norella smiled. "Life often is, when it's not constrained by mere survival." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the settlement's lights adjusted to the deepening night. Elira stirred in her mother's arms, the patterns on her skin shifting as she dreamed. "The Vanguard won't stop looking," Jack said finally, voicing the concern that had lingered in his mind. Commander Vex seemed personally invested in capturing the cipher, and now, with Elira's existence. "You're right," Norella acknowledged. "Our sanctuary will protect us for a time, but eventually, they will find us, which is why we must be prepared." She turned to face him fully. "My people have survived by hiding, by preserving what little remained of our culture and knowledge, but Elira represents a new possibility, not merely survival, but renewal and growth." "You're talking about expansion, reclaiming what was lost?" "In time, perhaps. But first, we must ensure she grows to understand her unique nature and the responsibility it carries." Norella's expression grew more serious. "The cipher's knowledge within her is powerful, Jack. It could rebuild worlds, or destroy them, in the wrong hands." Jack understood the implication. "You want me to help protect her?" "I want you to help guide her," Norella corrected gently. "You see the universe differently than we do. Your experiences, your perspective, even your human biology, offers something my people alone cannot provide." The request was unexpected, and Jack found himself momentarily at a loss for words. He had agreed to stay. Yes, but this was something more significant, a role he had never envisioned for himself. "I'm not exactly role model material," he said finally. "My moral compass has always pointed toward whatever keeps me alive and well paid." "And yet," Norella observed, "when faced with a choice between profit and doing what you knew was right, you chose the latter, multiple times. In fact," she smiled slightly, "you may not see yourself as a hero, Jack Evans, but your actions tell a different story." Before he could respond, a soft blue glow emanated from Elira. The sleeping child's hand reached out, tiny fingers extending toward Jack. Without thinking, he offered his own hand, and when Elira grasped his finger, a gentle current of the now familiar energy passed between them. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced before, a connection that went beyond physical contact, a sharing of something fundamental that defied explanation. In that moment, Jack felt a glimpse of what Elira perceived. The world, not as separate elements of biology and technology, matter and energy, but as a continuous, interconnected whole. The moment passed as Elira released his finger, settling back into sleep. But the impression remained, leaving Jack with a profound sense of possibility he had never before considered. "That was," he began, then stopped, finding words inadequate. "Her way of communicating," Norella explained softly. "More direct than words. She recognizes you. Jack trusts you." Jack looked at the sleeping child, then at Norella, And finally, at the Azuran settlement, spread before them, his unlikely new home. At least for now. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he couldn't yet imagine. The hegemony would continue its pursuit. Commander Vex would not easily abandon his quest for the cipher, and Elira's unprecedented nature presented questions no one could yet answer. Yet, for perhaps the first time in his life, Jack found himself welcoming the uncertainty. There was purpose here, something more meaningful than the next job, the next payment, the next escape. "Safety's on, or off?" Narella asked suddenly, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Jack laughed, remembering their first confrontation. A lifetime ago, it seemed now. "Does it matter anymore?" "I suppose not," she agreed. "We've moved beyond such simple binaries, haven't we?" As the last light of the binary stars faded from the horizon, Jack Evans, smuggler, reluctant hero, and now guardian to the most extraordinary child in known space, found himself at peace with the choice he had made. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, he would face them not alone, but as part of something larger than himself. Elira stirred again in her mother's arms, the patterns on her skin forming new configurations as she dreamed of possibilities no one else could yet imagine. The future, uncertain, dangerous, and filled with promise, awaited them all. In the vast expanse of space, the Vanguard cruiser, indomitable, continued its search, Commander Vex's determination undiminished by their quarry's escape. On distant Nexus Prime, rumors spread of a blue-skinned woman and a human smuggler who had stolen something of immeasurable value. And throughout the hegemony's territory, subtle shifts in power began as news of the cipher's recovery reached those with the resources and ambition to act on such information. But on a small, hidden world at the edge of charted space, a new chapter had already begun, one that would, in time, reshape the very fabric of existence throughout the stars. It had started with a finger on a trigger, a bluffed claim about a safety mechanism, and an unlikely alliance. It would continue with a child named Elira, whose very existence bridged worlds that had long been separated. And for Jack Evans, who had never sought more than his next payday, it offered something he hadn't known he was missing, a future worth fighting for.